am so like grateful to be a part of this conversation today and to help guide this conversation with y'all today. Hopefully y'all didn't have too much trouble at the front. We weren't doing signature matching up there, so it was all good. So no worries. But we are honestly just filled with gratitude. We've been, since last night to today, our entire team has been waiting for y'all to be here in this room with us. And I want to just set the tone on a couple things. One is, personally, for me, I've had two major feelings running through my stomach through this whole entire process. The first feeling that I had was honestly a lot of sadness, because in putting on and putting this event back together, we almost have to relive years of things that have been going on. And I thought about, like, for some of us who entered that conversation maybe in the past year, but for many of you who have been in this conversation for years, how heavy it can weigh on you. I grew up with my parents saying I'm supposed to be scared of government, right? And that I'm not supposed to be involved in it. You're supposed to stay away from it. They're like, you came to this country so that you would never have to deal with government again. And here I am with a policy degree, and finding myself in the midst of these types of conversations and actually maybe blindly believing in the possibility of democracy while also watching democracy stab me in the back of the heart. So I want to start with that. I started with a lot of sadness. And what it took, after conversations with many of you and even with the folks on this panel, whether we agree or disagree on certain things, was I ultimately landed on my second emotion, which was a lot of gratitude. That how lucky Atlanta is, that in spite of how people are often treated and how people's voices are treated, that folks like y'all still show up. And that you show up for a conversation about democracy. Whether you like it or not, you are a nerd, because you are here on a Thursday night talking about referenda in Atlanta. So whether you have felt like all hope is lost, I will tell you that inadvertently or not, you are the reason why we still have hope in this work, because some part of you believes that better is possible. And that affirmed for us why we wanted to have this conversation today. I want to make it clear that the Senate situation has not minced words on what we believe should happen, that we believe that this issue that we're going to talk about today should be on the ballot. That is not what we are debating or discussing today. What we are going to have a conversation about is what in the world has been going on, and this fight is still not over. So we have some goals out of the conversation today that I'm going to try to hold us to. And that means that there's going to be parts of the conversation that we really want to have, but we just don't have time to have it. And there are other avenues, and you need to have that conversation at the after party, whatever it is, the next thing, the next event. But there are three things that I really want to make sure we're able to do today. And then I'm going to ask you what you want out of this conversation. Number one, I want the record to reflect what happened. There's been a lot of places where we've heard people say, this is what happened, this is what happened. I want the record tonight to reflect what happened. I want us to be able to go through the history of how we got here. And with no revisions, but maybe some context. The second thing that I want to do is I want to be able to make this a productive conversation about what we do now. It is a lie and it is a misconception that this is over. That is not true. It literally is not true. It is hung up, Maybe it has been prevented, but it is certainly not over. So what do we do? And if I can get you that information, what you choose to do with it is up to you. But my goal is to get you that information today. And that is what I'm going to try to do every single step of the way. Now, if you use that for direct action, if you use that for advocacy, activism, whatever it is that you decide to do with that, I hope you will at least take the time today to really get all the information that you possibly can. And the city has arrived. So the last thing for today is I am not going to allow us to not, while we discuss the challenges that exist around this process, I'm also not going to allow us to not give people their flowers when we need to. In this work, many organizers and people who are in this room and not in this room have poured a lot into being here. And that takes sacrifice. That has taken people who are working here and spent enough time with their families. It has been a lot on people. So if you hear a bit of a celebratory framing today, if there's a tone of that, know that we can hold two emotions at once. We can hold disappointment, and we can also celebrate the wins and the things that are important for us in this work as well. So I'm not going to not do both of those things. So, while, oh wow, great, that was great. That is so stressful, by the way, I just want you to know. It's like someone drilling into your heart, or democracy, or whatever. But what I want you to do now is, you all came here for a reason, okay? I want you to look at the person next to you. I want you to introduce yourself. And I want you to look for things. One, if you were an Olympic athlete, what would you compete in? And then number two, do that one very quickly, please. And number two, why are you here? I want to know why you're here. Why are you here? Why did you choose to show up today? Why are you here? So just do that for a quick minute with the person next to you. Oh, you need that. Where in Louisiana?
Well, my mom's from Franklin, and my dad is from
Hey, hello.
Everybody knows. Well, they have some of our family to go there, and say our last name, that kind of yeah.
You have like you have a French last name? What's your last name?
No, I don't
They can't have a Cajun name. I found Louisiana fascinating. It's like one of the few parts of the country that is like, still has a really distinct culture.
I gotta move.
Hello. The South in general, but especially
Hello, it's working now?
It's so unique to the South. Other places feel very homogenized.
And the accent is also like very
Like this?
distinct.
That's what you need me to do?
I feel like I should know more about you, but were you born and raised in
Born and raised here. I grew up in Marietta. Went away for college law school and came back and been here as an adult. I live in the old Fourth Ward, like a mile from here.
So I saw some of y'all be like, I don't want to talk to you, and then the other person starts talking, and you're like, okay, I'll talk. So that's good. This is important because we are going to, unlike waiting till the end to do question, answer, and all of that, I'm not going to set that up like that today. I want to know what it is that you heard, that people are here. What do you want to know and get out of this conversation so I can ensure that that is in the facilitation that I'm doing, because we do have, because of childcare reasons and other things, people made a lot of adjustments to be here. We do have folks who may need to duck out early, things of that sort, so I just want to make sure we answer your questions while we're in the room, and if we can't answer them now, that we get you answers before this event is over. Make sense? So what'd you hear? What'd you hear? Why are people here?
People are upset about how this has gone and hasn't gone and what happened to it.
Yeah, so to express your frustration, to say, hey, I'm frustrated.
Yeah, and mine is also to find out more from my own city council rep, why he has voted like he has. And
Got it. So to get clarity on a voting record. Yeah, got it. What else? What'd you hear?
What's going on?
What do you mean when you say what's going on?
Well, it's been kind of silenced, except for the fire supposedly.
Got it. So what's going on? What's been happening since signatures were submitted and now? That's what you want to get out of it. Got it. I got you. Yes?
What would it take for City Hall to stop spending millions of our dollars to fight us in court?
Okay, so what's going on first of all, maybe what's going on in court, right? And then what does it take to make this not become a court fight or stay a court fight? I hear you. Got it. Yeah, what else? You had something?
Why is construction moving forward when it's in question?
Got it. So if there's a question in play, why does construction continue to move forward? Understood. Yes?
I mean, I'm from unincorporated Cass, like nearby, and I just kind of want to know because I can't vote people out. Like, what are some of the steps that we can do, like, organizing voting blocks and stuff too, like, and just kind of looking at that happening.
So what is the role of maybe voting blocks or things to actually make sure people are heard in different ways, so beyond just elections? Got it. What else? What else do y'all want to get out of today? Yes.
I'm really recognized and I recognize, I think labor and many other institutions, they really base their fight on democracy. I want to know why these organizations aren't framing this as like one of the big expressions of democracy, especially with time.
Got it. So why is this not framed as a larger issue of democracy? Got it. Okay. Yes, go ahead.
And kind of to that point, why aren't all politicians in the city just incredibly proud of the direct democracy that these city citizens, achieved beyond all, at all costs and, at all obstacles?
So why is there not a sense of pride?
Yeah.
What are they feeling? Maybe it is pride. Let's see, let's find out. What else? Anything else? Yes?
The current community engagement plan for the impact of the neighborhood, now that construction and so forth has been moved along. So what is the impact of the neighborhood engagement?
Yep. Thank you. Anything else? You want to make sure? Yeah.
Just reporting from the chat.
Oh, reporting live from the chat. I can't wait. People are real brave online. Can't wait. There we go.
Their names are associated.
Great. Can't wait.
So people want answers. What's happening with the referendum? A lot of people want to know why Amir is here.
Yep.
Questions. Yeah, that's basically it.
Okay. We'll make sure we ask that question. Great. Anything else?
Well,
Yeah.
one thing, and I tried to do this, is why has anybody contacted Michelle Obama? Because the South River Trail, which is named after her, starts at that park next to the.
Side question: do you have Michelle Obama's Because if you're like hooked up like that, that's amazing. Okay, I got you. Thank you. Anything else? Okay. Cool. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get this conversation started, and I'm gonna start with the same question that I asked y'all with you, which is why are you here? You didn't have to be, and just to make it fully transparent, each of them were invited the exact same way. There was no like cookie trail that led to our office. It was, hey, we would like to have a conversation about the state of the referendum. People are confused about what's going on. We need clarity on what it is and why a referendum has not moved forward. Each of them responded that they would be willing to attend. We gave them logistical information. I told them the types of things that people have been asking us upstairs. It's about 15 minutes ago was the first time we huddled on it, and now we are here with this conversation. So this is an unscripted conversation, and I'm hoping to incorporate everything that you have into the scope of this conversation. So I'm going to start here. Amir, I want to start with you.
Could you introduce everybody? Because I know the book.
They'll introduce themselves in just a second. So thank you, Steve. So I want to give you an opportunity, Amir, if you can introduce yourself, and then tell folks why you're here.
Well, I'm here, yeah. Well, thank you, Rohit and CCI, for hosting and for inviting me. I'm Amir Farokhi. I serve on the City Council. I represent District 2, which includes most of downtown, Midtown, coming east, Old Fourth Ward, Inman Park, Ponce Highland, Candler Park. And I've been my second term, and back half of our second term. And look, I told this to Rohit upstairs. We live in a time in which we tend to sit in our echo chambers, whether it's online or in groups, and this is one echo chamber. It's one that I know there's a lot of frustration and pain, and and continued anger in, and I feel that, I respect it, and I think it's important for all of us, but especially politicians, to put themselves in positions where you have to have hard conversations with folks. And so that's fundamentally why I'm here. I try to live my values in that way. I believe deeply in a robust civil society. There's a Goethe quote that I have enough in me to be both a gentleman and a rogue. And I think that applies to policy issues as well. Very little in our world is black and white. There's a lot of nuance, and our public discourse is rarely that way. It's oftentimes good versus bad, black versus white, and I find that is very corrosive to our democracy and our civil society. And the institutions and places where people like us can get together and may not agree with each other are fewer and fewer. And so at a philosophical level, I know that's not why we came to have this conversation tonight, but at a philosophical level, that's why I accepted the invitation. I think it's important for me to have these conversations with, I see constituents here and folks who don't live in my districts. We're not always going to agree, but I hope that we build connective civil society tissue by having these hard conversations. I think substantively to the conversation we're going to have, wherever the questions take us, I'm a lawyer, though I'm an inactive member of the Georgia Bar. I do not represent the city, the law department, or the city of Atlanta. I'm a member of the legislative body, the city council. I am not here to opine on the merits of the case before the 11th Circuit that we're waiting on a ruling on. I'm happy to give reflections on the timeline and moments on that timeline as to what may have happened or kind of political context, but just want to be here to have an open conversation. And I want to acknowledge, look, there's, I'll say two things, one of which you won't like, one of which I think is important to acknowledge. Look, I sat through the public comment that many of you made, maybe a couple times. We've had a number of meetings where we've had significant public comment. And I know there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and in fact, an unfortunate death that happened along the way. And I don't take that lightly. I mean, this is, everyone, whether you believe in the building of a training center or you're vehemently opposed to it, those are important opinions and valid opinions to have. And I, as a council member, I represent both perspectives. I'll walk out of my door and people will tell me they appreciate my votes from people I don't always expect to appreciate my votes. And there's times when people will yell at me, and that's the nature of the position that council members are in, or state reps or whatever. But I think it's easy to close off ourselves to these hard conversations. I just want to be here to have honest reflection tonight.
Okay, thank you. Brittany.
So, hey everybody, Brittany Whaley. I am the Southeast Regional Director for Working Families Party. In our capacity with the Stop Cop City referendum process, we, along with Song Power and Working Families Power, RC4, ran the signature gathering process. And so I'm here because people, we matter, our voices still matter, folks still care about this, we will continue to care about this. And in the same way, we talk a lot about how Atlanta influences everything, right? Right now across this country, there are only 3 states that are not building a cop city facility or something that is similar to a cop city or a training facility for police officers. And so it really dovetails with the conversation we need to have across this country about public policy, about public safety, about environmental racism, about transparency. It's no surprise that across the police foundations, right? And so there's an agenda. And so while we feel it is very important and critical here in Atlanta, right? And I think that there's a lot of weight to us doing a thing that has never been done before. It also is connected to an agenda, and it's connected to how we see public safety across the country. So I think both, and the folks who signed those petitions, the 116,000, we will transform Atlanta, and they are not going anywhere. And so we still have an opportunity to be inside of this conversation, and at the very least, move in a direction where folks feel like they are heard, or we could do a course correction in what is a representative democracy, but using a tool of direct democracy.
Thank you, Brittany. Ruby Beth, why are you here?
Thanks for that introduction. That was beautiful, by the way. I love when people start about their feelings. My name is Ruby Beth. I work with Movement Law Lab. We are an organization that works at the intersection of law and organizing. I am here because I actually work, our organization works globally. And so to kind of continue exactly what Brittany is saying, I'm here to offer offer some context that I think many people in this room have, but I think can be really helpful to underscore about what are we actually talking about when we talk about this word democracy. We've never had a democracy in this country, right? That is like hardly debatable. And yet, as we're starting to see states in particular slip into minority authoritarian rule, the tools that we're using, that we're calling democratic tools, are going to become more important, right? They're going to become the thing. And if we want to even begin to have a conversation about what's going on here, we need to also be thinking about it in the context of this country, but also in the global context of rising authoritarianism in places like Argentina and Poland. I mean, we're talking global. So a lot of what I'm here to offer and to kind of think about is how we're using these tools in the much, much larger context.
Dr. Eccles, why are you here?
I'm Jackie Eccles. I'm board president of South River Watershed Alliance, an organization that's been working on environmental justice issues from the headwaters of the South River in East Point to Jackson Lake, with primary focus on that section that's in the city of Atlanta and DeKalb County. And I bring kind of a different perspective because my view is as the environment goes, so goes the community. And the South River Watershed has been inundated with hazardous industries, with degradation, with racism for a really, really long time. So, you know, where we are with the whole notion of Cop City was made possible because of that history. You know, it just didn't come to someone one day in City Hall and say, I think we'll go build a 171-acre facility in Southeast Atlanta. Didn't happen. It's just that's where it's supposed to go because it's where it's always gone, these degrading industries. I think also quickly, in terms of my perspective, it's more from that of the Black community, particularly the Black community that's a little older than most people in this room. And that is, they are not necessarily anti-police. And a lot of this focus has been on, you know, promoting this notion of and they are most impacted by it. And that has been provided the opportunity for the city of Atlanta and the council to kind of drive this wedge through this issue, because what we don't see is, you know, the uproar around Cop City from folks in the community, where 85% of the folks in Southeast Atlanta along the South River are Black. And so I think there needs to be a conversation about that, how we can engage and mobilize those folks. And, you know, that can only be from, the referendum may be that, but they need to feel included and not really being dragged into this issue solely on this notion of being anti-police.
So it's got to be something more.
It's got to be something more.
So, Ruby-Beth, I'm going to have you start with a couple questions. And again, due to time, I may just move us along a little quickly. But we put a definition up here about what a referendum actually is. So we can just all be clear on the fact that referendum, you can read it for yourself, but it's ultimately a vote on a measure so submitted. So some decision that was made, the people's ability to be able to have a say on what that decision is. Can you contextualize the role that, just from your experience, how have you seen, why is referendum, why is that an important concept, and how is it used in our, maybe not full democracy, but is used as a democratic principle or tool?
Yes, and I will use my cheat sheet.
Okay, great.
So, okay, a couple of things. One that I want to say is that we've talked about this a lot within my organization, is that the most common path towards authoritarianism is actually what's termed electoral autocracy, right? So this is a system that preserves some dimensions of democracy, like semi-competitive elections, but loses all these other critical features like separation of powers, press freedom, civil rights, like, you know, corporate money and all of these things. And so referendums become one of these few tools, and they're becoming fewer and fewer tools that allow people to engage with the politics at hand, right? Representative democracy is, it's like conceptually the idea that you know kind of where this person will stand as you're voting them into office. Things happen after elections, right? You have opinions about how your person who's representing you is acting and behaving and the policy choices and the budgets that they're passing after they have become the person that is supposed to be representing you, but there's no way to contact, right? You're screaming at public comment for hours and they're like, thanks for coming, you know, that whole thing. So referendums then have become a tool that are increasing around the country in terms of this. And our friends at the Ballot Initiative Strategy Center sent me some talking points. Okay, ballot measures give us the ability to organize. If you want, right, so and I think I said this before, as the US moves more towards minority rule and authoritarianism, people are turning to initiative processes to give themselves power and agency to make decisions that govern their lives. So while this tends to happen in, like, you know, places that are really rising authoritarianism, we're seeing them in places that are run by people who would never identify as an authoritarian, where they're in control, but the elected officials still tend to have more allegiances to corporations. And so that's why this referendum conversation is starting to explode this way.
Gotcha. So that's to ground us in what we're discussing, is this actual democratic tool that is supposed to give the public an opportunity to weigh in on the people that they elect through that. So I want to just run us through a timeline really quickly, and then I'm going to have a follow-up question. So just so we all have this timeline together, on September 7th, there was an ordinance that was adopted. That ordinance that was adopted was to lease 85 acres to the Atlanta Police Foundation for a new public safety training facility, Cop City, right? So there was a transfer, it was a lease transfer, right? That was in September of 2021, actually in the heat of the 2021 elections. In June 2023, another ordinance was adopted to contribute $31 million toward the construction of that facility. So there was a $31 million grant that was given to say, hey, we want you to build this. This is coming out of our general fund money. On June 7th, maybe not unofficially, but certainly officially by some standards, the Vote to Stop Cop City campaign was launched, and petitions started to say, okay, we want to start to petition our government because we have the right to do that. And the municipal clerk on June 21st said, okay, cool, we are going to actually approve this petition. So that's just some context on how before we got started. Now this is important. That piece of, that ordinance that we talked about, 210367, which is the ordinance in 2021 that was to transfer the land, a lease, to the Atlanta Police Foundation, went up for a public vote. And that public vote was, by the way, delayed because people said community engagement just was not where it needed to be. I believe Councilmember Archibong at the time made really strong comments on the fact that we must delay this. And even now current Mayor Dickens, at the time Councilmember Dickens, said we need to delay because community engagement has been insufficient and ineffective. But they didn't delay it very long. It was just a matter of a few weeks, and then a vote actually happened. Now, what we knew is who was likely going to vote one way or another. What we also knew was that, Amir, that you were a new dad, and that you were already out on paternity leave during this time, right? So that was already in the works, you were out on paternity leave. I want to ask you a very explicit question, because I want to make sure that we are clear on the record and we don't have to guess. If you were on council on that day in September, would you have voted yes or no?
So first of all, yeah, I tweeted I was going to be on paternity leave back in March because we had no idea when the vote on this was gonna happen. It was actually slated to happen in the summertime.
I hear that.
Because I knew there's gonna be some vote somewhere, someone's like, you skipped out. But I took that month off after, long in advance. I was on the Public Safety Committee Public Safety Committee at the time. So this ordinance came through Public Safety Committee in August when I was still not on leave. I voted for it. There was a lot of conversation then, and I voiced my reservations. In my mind, y'all can disagree with me. There's kind of three camps of opposition. One is folks who were uncomfortable with the site for environmental reasons, which is, I think, where I had the most sympathy. Then there's kind of the abolition crowd, folks who just don't believe there should be a facility like this at all, at the scale or whatever. That's a fair debate to have. We can have that debate. And then as this went on, I think there was more of a concern over democracy as we've had played through this referendum piece. But I voted for it in committee. I would have voted for it.
You would not have.
No, would have.
Well, you would have.
I voted for it out of committee. Yeah.
You voted for it out of committee.
Correct.
So the record should reflect that you would have, if you were here, you would have voted for it anyway. So you not being there would not have changed the number.
What was the final vote count? I don't remember. Yeah. 4 no's.
Yeah, 4 no's. Okay, so we have that on record, right? So what I want to do from there is to ask you, Amir, like, do you believe that, based on what Ruby Beth outlined for us around the idea of referenda, like, do you believe that that there should be a role of direct democracy while people are in office, or do you believe that decisions should only be made in 4-year cycles around elections? We've had this conversation. You've been on record before to say, hey, if you don't agree with what I said, vote me out.
Right.
But that shouldn't, let me ask you, should that be our only option, or should the people have the right to question your decision through referenda?
So I don't think it's either or. I think the answer is yes and yes, right? So, look, the definition of referenda you put up is a definition. It's not what the state says is the process, right? There is a state statute where the municipalities are obligated to follow, and a lot of what the courts are hashing out are disagreement on the interpretation application of the home rule that the state puts on municipalities, right? So the city, we don't have a referendum process that we have articulated as a city. It's put upon us by the state that applies to all municipalities in the state. So there's a state definition of what a referendum should look like that is at issue here, right? I forgot the initial thrust of your question.
The initial part of my question is for the public to be able to disagree with the decision that you make.
I'm a big proponent of participatory budgeting. I think residents should have a direct say in how the budget's spent, in part, in full. I've tried to advocate that because I think there's direct engagement with decision-making at any level of government is a positive thing, especially if you can get the people who don't normally show up to show up and participate, which is a whole nother conversation. But I think my point for bringing up the Georgia statute is we're somewhat handicapped by what the state says. The state says, here's the Home Rule Act. How cities apply it is up for debate here in the court system. But I do think there's a role for referenda. It's in our state constitution. There should be opportunities for direct democracy. But I also believe, I bristle a little bit at this has been a kind of an erosion of democracy. To your point, we've had this discussion. This is a representative democracy. Ernest, who lives in my district, could run against me if he wants to, and that's fair game, right? Like and I'm fully aware that any vote I take, some people love it, some people don't love it, and that applies to whether we put a new stop sign at an intersection or something more major like this, right? And I do think, as much as we get frustrated by the system, I get frustrated by it too at the state and federal level. There are these built-in, fairly resilient release valves, which are periodic elections. Now we can have a good conversation about the role of corporate money and lobbying and who actually runs and who gets elected. That's a fair conversation to have about the health of our democracy. But I think that the flip side, and we don't have this in Georgia, you see it in California, where it's really easy to have a referendum, is you can have a bit of paralysis in governance, right? And so I think there's a balance to be struck. There should be an avenue for direct democracy. That's what we're hashing out here in the court system. But I also think that all of your votes matter, and you can exercise that vote whenever elections come up. I know that isn't always satisfying because we want, especially on an issue we care very deeply about, we're emotionally invested in, we want immediate repercussions if we don't like the outcome. But I think somewhere on that spectrum, there's a role for direct democracy and referenda.
Where is that? But that's what I'm asking you. I'm not sure what your answer is.
At some level, it doesn't matter what I say because we have a state law that says.
Well, but it does say, right, that the role of referenda, so just to pull that up, it is within the city charter, it is laid out. There are powers that are given, and the biggest thing that was brought up was, look, there is a role for referenda. The council has to create what that process is.
Which we did.
Well, you did well after, right? So, but what I'm saying is when the petition process started, it is true that y'all did not have a process for direct democracy, for referenda at the time, because it's never happened before. Is that accurate?
Well, I think there's a default process that would come. Either way, yes, we voted on a process. Councilmember Backyard introduced a paper earlier this year. Right? Earlier this year.
Yeah, much after petitions were submitted.
Correct, 100%.
So, but prior to petitions being submitted, there was not a process. That process, we still started a petition process on good faith, and I want to come to you, Brittany, on this, is folks started a petition process on good faith that a process would be actually put into play.
Right.
It was not until, as you just said, earlier this year.
Correct.
But it is unfair to say, I think, that the city council does not have power to put a to actually do direct democracy or to have people-driven referendum.
So again, I'm not going to speak for the city's law department, but there was a supporter report piece September 27th, 26th of last year that discussed the city's position on whether the law department believes that the council could theoretically say, hey, we're just going to cast open a vote on a policy matter and let the public decide, right? The city's position, and I'll defer to the supporter report article, which also links the law department's opinion that was shared with council and then linked to the supporter report, fine, would say, state law, this is the city's position, I'm not opining on it one way or the other, that state law prohibits polls or policy decisions by straw poll, right? That's one. The other is concern of ex post facto votes, that if you were to vote on this and somehow it had legal effect retroactively, like you can't cancel a contract with the police foundation, for example. And then there was one other piece that I'm losing right now, but I would defer to that article because it did a good job and it linked to the law department's position on it.
Okay, yeah. I'm gonna come back because I know you're one of the folks who has to duck out early, so I wanna go to Brittany and then we'll come back as well to other panelists. I want to be respectful of that. Brittany, y'all started a process in good faith. There was you were kind of with a number of organizations that said there's many avenues to voicing and to movement. One of those avenues could be direct democracy. From your perspective, what was thought about when you were going into the petition process, and what was surprising to you along the way that you may not have known that the city either said one thing did another, or created a process that you agreed or disagreed with? What happened in terms of starting that petition process?
Yeah, so, well, first, I think when we talk about transparency, so from the time we submitted the language for the petition to the clerk's office to the time it was approved, it was not without any commentary on why it was not approved. Then we decided to go to the clerk's office, and I think a part of the biggest disappointment is that there was no process that was laid out until after the signatures were submitted. But if you think about the timeline, it was 96 days from the time we started petitioning to the time we submitted these signatures. And so that was ample time to be inside of a conversation about what the process is. We were also in the dark about how many signatures we actually needed. So about a week before we submitted these signatures, we were told a number of 63,000, 203 or whatever it was, right? Before then, we looked at the statute to the best of our interpretation because legal conveniently did not step in and say anything publicly. So we did our interpretation of the statute, the ordinance, was that we needed a certain percentage of the 2021 electorate to come out and sign this petition, right? And so every step along the way, there was nothing in writing, there was no correspondence, there was no guidance, and that guidance was only given to us after or very close to when we submitted those signatures. When we submitted those signatures, and that's not to mention that an interim clerk was hired to help oversee this process, and we requested several meetings with that interim clerk, and still that person wasn't responsive either. So we tried to get clarity, again, good faith, we are doing everything we can. To be very precise, it was 39 local organizations that were involved. This is not counting any organizations that are not based here in Georgia. And so folks had their people out in the streets. We're doing everything that we thought we needed to do. Again, the other piece of this is when we went to submit the signatures, this was another moment. We have 16 boxes, signatures, we are carrying them in. We tried to get clarity beforehand. Hey, are you going to accept these signatures? We understand what's happening in the courts, right? As far as we know, we're going to accept these signatures.
There were council members who said, we are going to accept these signatures.
There were council members who said, we will accept these signatures. We let them know, be ready to receive these signatures. When we arrived to the clerk's office, we were handed a piece of paper that said, we will receive your signatures, sure, and we will lock them up in the office and we will not count them. And so then, at that moment, we are in the clerk's office with our attorney, talking to them and to their legal department, and this is after we have raised the money that we needed to raise to collect the signatures. Now we're talking about a legal fight. So what does this actually mean? Because the legal interpretation from the law department of the city, we had our own interpretation, we engaged other counsel, that cost us money, right? But then you have the city spending money to shut down our efforts. And so like every step along the way, like yes, we're learning, and we understand that perhaps the council's learning, the administration's learning, the clerk's learning. However, we're doing everything that we need to do, including talking to people like the Ballot Initiative Strategy Center to better understand what are the best practices in the 25, 26 states that have citizen-initiated ballot measures, including understanding what the validity rate will likely be when you collect signatures in, you know, by hundreds of thousands, right, in some states, but for us, over 100,000. And so like, we're doing our due diligence and spending that time checking all of those boxes, trying to fully understand what we need to do for what seemed like a Herculean task. And the city was silent until it was convenient, only to shut us down.
Got it. So, Ruby Beth, is this, contextualize this for us. Is this normal? Like, is this, like, you know, you've heard a council member kind of say, look, the law department has told us this, there's state preemptions, there's things of that sort. I think maybe, you know, some of us understand that, some of us like are like, wait a second, we hear one thing from one person, one thing from another. Is this, you know, is this a true legal conundrum that we're in that needs to be fixed at the state level, or is this a matter of different interpretations of the same law?
I don't know if this is normal. I don't know if this is normal in terms of if this is how most municipalities are treating referendum processes. What we do know is that there's a reason that this particular initiative has made national news, right? There's a reason that we're seeing murals about the city in Palestine. Like, that we know, what we know is that this has become so shrouded in mystery and lack of transparency that everyone who is reading about it across the world is wondering what happened in Atlanta. Yeah. So I don't know, right? I don't know if this is normal. I don't know. You know, the Southeast has state preemption issues and will until that changes. There's all kinds of dynamics going on, and sure, the relationship between the state and the city, fraught, complicated, we know all of that, right? So sure, there's legal, you can make any kind of legal argument you want to justify a lot of these things, but you know, of course this isn't normal.
What are lawyers in the movement space saying about this? What is that? Because it's a hot topic. It's been
extremely hot topic.
I mean, the number of lawyers that have reached out to Atlanta folks to say, hey, like, what's going on down there? What is the sentiment among attorneys that do this type of direct democracy work? What are you hearing?
How do you answer questions like that? Appropriate spaces. What you're hearing is people wondering how folks in a democratically run city are justifying this to each other and to the people who live there.
So Dr. Eccles, one thing that has happened, and then I want to come right back to Amir with something else before he's got to go, is you have talked about the fact that you know, a lot of times what a lot of the videos and conversations that have happened and the response to this has been, you know, these are just outside agitators. These are people who are coming in, they just want to throw things, they just want to do this and that, they want to hurt people, like they want to do that. But the vast majority, I mean, these are words that have been uttered. The vast majority of my constituents, right, or like the constituents of Atlanta, or the people around the thing, they want this. Like that they are for this. We saw the videos, right? There's an actual Twitter account that was started that was just like people being like, I'm here, I live in the neighborhood, I'm black, I want this facility, right? And they're like, see, they want it. But there is an argument, right, that is being made of whose version of this story is right. Is the city right that we're in an echo chamber, or as Councilmember Farokhi said, that this is an echo chamber, but everybody else is really like, those folks are crazy and this really needs to get built?
This isn't the only echo chamber. There's other echo chambers about that.
Well, I love my little echo chamber. But for what it is, right? If that's true, are we in an echo chamber? Are we crazy here? Like, please help me understand. Like, is this, or if you would go to historically black communities, would they be like, yes, we want this build this in my neighborhood, build it now, stop it? Like, is that what's happening?
Well, you know, black people are in a really ticklish position. No, I mean, I think that if you went into black communities, what you would find more than anything is hesitancy to say anything. And that's because they are very vulnerable to retaliation. And so they aren't going to say anything. If they end up on the evening news, that person might need a job the next morning. That's exactly why Andre was so quick to plaster all of the petitions on the internet. That was designed to intimidate. That wasn't designed to send a message to communities, particularly those in Southeast Atlanta, because that's what they dealt with forever. And so I think that's why for so long I even resisted the notion of calling it Cop City. Call it the Atlanta Police Training Facility. It makes the community more comfortable with that because they are not anti-police. I mean, I wish, you know, we were at a point in this country where we didn't need the police. Now, they need different training. That is absolutely the case. And it does need to be decentralized across the city so it doesn't impact one community. But to take the silence, particularly in the black communities over in that area, as being supported is wrong.
Yeah.
Because no one, I mean, it's almost like saying you don't care about your community. You don't care the impact of this facility on your community. That somehow a community that would be objectionable in a white neighborhood is quite okay in a black neighborhood.
Yeah.
But the way it's been promoted pretty much throughout this whole campaign, there was a need to provide a space for the black community to come in. Just didn't exist. You were either for Cop City or you were against it.
It's an easy binary. You're either for it or against it. Not even about the facility, but are you for or against police, essentially, is what the conversation became. So I want to turn to you, Amir. So we got to get somewhere with this, right? At the end of the day, we can bicker about what the law is saying, what they're not saying, where they have, in some cases, crossed a line in their, in what they might be advice that they may, or where conflict of interest may exist. We know that, for example, as a city council member, you can't go get outside legal counsel. You have the same legal counsel that the mayor has. So at the end of the day, the mayor's attorney is your attorney. And so that is weird, because if you have something that you may disagree with, you're not gonna get legal advice that is going to counter the other person's client. That would be a conflict of interest. I'm not a lawyer, but is that right? Is right? I'm not, like, you can't, right? Like you can't get outside legal counsel, correct?
If I want to pay for it, I could. I don't have the type of money. The councilors don't have a budget where you're out paying lawyers.
Right, so you're relying on the mayor's attorney to give you advice on what should happen.
So under charter, it is a dual reporting system. Now, there are concerns, and I've expressed concerns about having one law department that serves both sides of the legislative and executive branch. I think in practice, it would be cleaner legally and for my own peace of mind if we had legal counsel just for council, city council. But that's not where we are.
Yeah.
Now, they say that they're pretty good about making sure that there's no sharing of intention or opinions to the other side. And I think they're pretty good about it. There were some flashpoints in the previous administration where that wasn't the case. But it's a tension point. It's one that can get messy.
Got it.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. But for interest of time, when it comes to referenda, it is not like, for example, we agree this process has been messy, right? We agree that community engagement has been imperfect in this process. Like, we can argue about the extremes of it, but ultimately, council does have the power to put referenda on the ballot, whether it is people-driven petition or not. So there is a case to be made, and this is just for folks to have as reference, that recently, since we tracked some very recent things, if council wants to tax you, and they want if they want to tax you, they can put that on the ballot. If they want to go take a bond, they can put that on the ballot. If they want to know about whether you want alcohol sales to happen on Sundays, right? Something just as trivial as that, they can say, we want to put that on the ballot. Something, they can say, we want to get a more moderate sales tax, also can be put on the ballot. This is not outside of the power. So, please, in layperson terms, explain to me, and I'm sure you're gonna have context around it, but explain to me why this is not something that you would just not put straight on the ballot.
So first, I would note that most of those referenda are specifically articulated by the state saying you can have a referenda on these issues, right? Maybe not all, I can't see all of them, but but to your question, and this goes to Steve's question earlier, is like, why hasn't anything happening? What's the status of things? And I don't want to get too into the minutiae of the legal stuff, but during last summer, folks who were collecting petitions took the city to district court saying this prohibition on non-city residents collecting signatures is improper. The district court said, I'm leading up to your question, like what's next, right?
Sure, I don't want to win on a technicality.
Yeah, no, I get it.
I got you.
And district court said, yeah, we're gonna say things, you get more time, you're gonna get a reset of it was 95 days, whatever it was, 90 plus days to go out and collect signatures. You can use someone who lives in Decatur to collect a signature if you want to, right? What matters is who is signing it, and do they live in the city, and are they a registered voter under the required time frame. The city appealed that to the 11th Circuit. The 11th Circuit said, I'm sorry?
Why did the city appeal it?
Right, but they didn't, right? This is the law department. The law department here is responding to the executive branch. So they appealed to the 11th Circuit. 11th Circuit said the stay, the new time period is void, but did not rule on the merits of the argument on kind of what ballots could be counted when. There was an oral argument in December before the 11th Circuit. Nothing has come from the 11th Circuit since. And so I will tell you, I think the position of all council members, otherwise you would have seen some of council members who fought funding of the training center put up legislation for this. The position is frankly, wait till the 11th Circuit rules to figure out what can be counted, and then once it's counted, assuming the requisite signatures were collected, then we'll vote to certify a referendum and put it on the ballot.
But there's nothing that stops you from validating and verifying those signatures today, correct? You cannot stop the city, the council could direct the city clerk to count signatures today.
So,
right now.
but the city's position, and this is reflecting what the city has argued, right? The city's position, as far as I understand it, is, this goes back to your earlier timeline, when the signatures were submitted, right before then, the 11th Circuit voided the district court's extension of time. And so when the signatures were submitted, it was after the original deadline. So the city's position is, under state law, we are not we are not allowed to count signatures that were submitted after the original deadline.
But that's just not the, so what rule are they? What are they, they're citing Home Rule Act on that, or what is?
Well, I think the process, right, because the 11th, you may correct me if I'm wrong, right, but
is that legal guidance, or is that actual?
Well, I think it's what they've argued in court. I mean, look, you can pull up the 11th Circuit argument. That's what they've argued in court. So all this goes to say, I don't think you'll see any movement politically from the council until the 11th Circuit rules. It says, okay, you can count the signatures that were collected from date A to date B, or date A to date C, whatever they end up ruling is, right? And then I think you'll see the vote, the count happen. And then I think there's a 90-day notice period for when the election or the referendum would happen.
So let's say the 11th Circuit says one thing or another. Council still has the power, correct, to put this on the ballot. Just going back to my original question, which is that council has the, like, okay, let's cut the bullshit for a second.
No,
like, I'm just saying, but like, Amir, for 1 second, man, like, what's happening, right, is that we can find any legal argument now to invalidate this process. And what starts to feel like, from the organizer perspective, is that no matter what I do, no matter what part of the game I play, the intention of this city and this council is to make sure that these things do not get counted. So all I'm getting, so maybe answer a different question, is help me. Amir, what's something you really care about? Tell me something, one thing, whatever it might be. Just give me the thing that you and your family really cares about.
That's a broad question. There's a lot of things I really care about,
just
right?
one thing, man. One thing you really
I care about my kids.
Okay, you care about your kids, right? So you care about your kids. Let's say your kids, the park near your house or whatever it might be, something terrible happens and your kids are affected by it. And now you feel like, I want to do something about this, right? And every step of the way, people are telling you, well, listen, just wait, we gotta wait for the league. What would you do if you were an organizer? Give us some advice, because if we're not gonna get to the point of because again, legal said this, we're not gonna do this, we're not gonna move forward, it doesn't have the votes. Frankly, the people who did vote against the things are saying that they are too scared to actually act. Now you can say, I'm just saying.
Like, they're my colleagues, I love them, we agree on almost everything. Like, and I will say it, none of these votes happen in a vacuum. And I think one of the things that gets lost in this conversation, I know it's frustrating to folks, many of you who are sitting here, is that this process, whatever is established, however it is set up, is not just for this issue. It will be reflected in other referendum that come up in the city, whether it's a bucket city movement or whatever it may be.
Come up with that many tens of thousands of signatures.
Right.
So what I'm saying is, I want to know, if you went out, if you were, because it's something you believed in, you canvassed with people that you believed with, y'all got enough signatures based upon what the city told you was supposed to happen. They switched the game up a few times, whatever it might be. What would you do? What should, at this point, people are like, you know what? Why am I even trying the democratic process? I'm trying to save the idea. I promise you, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to save the idea that democratic process might still have a chance. I need you to prove me right or wrong. And if it doesn't have a chance, then let people know that so they can take whatever they need to do. But if there is a chance, help guide us on what it is that you need or the council needs in order to move this process forward so you can rebuild trust. What does that look like?
Look, I think the 11th Circuit needs to rule, and then we'll count whatever they say needs to be counted, and then hopefully if there's enough signatures, we'll have a referendum. I mean, I think it's pretty clear now.
But you could do that counting now.
Why did that appeal happen in the first place? That's what started this whole conundrum.
Yeah, I don't speak for the law department.
Could we do, could we not? If the city hadn't appealed it and said, look, that court's right, people should be allowed to get the signatures. Why not go with that? What was the problem there?
So the council does have the ability to call on the mayor to appeal, or to drop the appeal, correct? You could, through resolution, say, if you really believe that that is truly the only thing in the way, then you could say, we the council, just as you asked for African American studies to be recognized, right? It's things you say that may or may not be acted on. You could put a resolution out if you truly did believe that this was the only thing in the way to call on the appeal to be dropped.
Then we don't have clarity on, because the process at the start was messy, right? That summer of last year, there was a disagreement on what the time frame should be and how the signatures should be collected and submitted, right?
Is that really what you care about? That's what I'm trying to get at. Is it about the technicality of a date? Or is it about the fact that there is no question that there are?
But it's not, look, I understand that the bigger issue is like, the bigger issue here ultimately is like, what does public safety look like in our city, right? And how should we be approaching public safety, which is a really important conversation to have, right? What should policing look like? Some people don't think you should be policing at all, right? That's
different conversation.
I get it, but the technicalities matter because they set up a process that will be applied in other circumstances as well, and we need to have a very clear process that's not as messy next time. And look, you can assert the mayor has various motives and failures, and they may or may not be true, but from a council perspective, in my 7 years on council, I've never seen one time I saw when we had 2 opinions of an attorney general that said we're not preempted on something, but the council is almost always gonna follow the law department's advice, almost always. I haven't seen a situation where they're like, the law department says you can't do this, and we just do it, right? I think politically, there's not 8 votes to do it, and I think that's why you haven't seen some council members who voted against funding the facility introduce that legislation.
Brittany, maybe I'm not asking the question right. Brittany, as someone who represents a large, over 39 organizations that have been in here, what do we need from council? What would be helpful for us to get from council? Because what we're being told at this point, right, is we're gonna wait for the 11th Circuit. That's it, no matter what. There's argument on whether they can introduce that legislation without the 11th Circuit ruling or not. They could put it on the ballot without the 11th Circuit. Has the law department given you directive that you cannot put it on the ballot unless the 11th Circuit rules?
Well, I would defer back to the supporter report piece from last year, which lays out the law department's position on council on its own establishing a straw poll or a vote.
But it's not a straw poll. But I'm asking this question of whether you can actually start validating and verifying the petitions or put it on the ballot directly. Have you been given any legal guidance that says you cannot do that?
I don't recall one or the other. It's been, to be perfectly honest, it's been a while since we've had these conversations at council. Kind of this quiet moment hasn't come up often. So I don't recall. They may have, I just don't recall.
Brittany, for you, do you believe council is going to do anything after the 11th Circuit? And if not, what do you need from, what would you ask Amir while you have his attention and his time? Like what?
Well, okay. First of all, we should have your attention because we went out and we collected the signatures. Here's the thing, like when we didn't have the process and we went out and we collected the signatures and then we went back and forth with the cases and the stay and so forth, the city is banking on the court coming back and telling us that we can only count a percentage of our signatures. And so therefore, the hopefully you will have enough signatures will be as surely you will not have enough signatures because of how the ruling will unfold, right? And so I think that, again, we go back to how do we open up democracy to people? And so it's very interesting that in 2024, we have folks bouncing in and out of Atlanta because they want our votes and because they want us to have faith in our democratic process, because they want us in our political engagement in one of the what was supposed to be the quietest years in our city. People were saying, how are you going to get somebody to care about a thing in an off year? We had people across the city gathering these signatures. The signatures are real, they sit in the clerk's office, they're in a box, et cetera, et cetera. But my point is, or I guess what we really need some engagement is, I still don't see, not only did you botch public engagement or any kind of community engagement, it actually doesn't matter. Some people are gonna say they don't wanna see this happen and other people will say they will. And so at the end of the day, what we're saying is enough people said something. They said that this is something we care about and we want to directly weigh in on. And so if enough people said it, then we should put it on the, you should be working just as aggressively as we are to put it on the ballot. So the fact that we can sit here and say that council, it's been quiet in council and you haven't talked about it, that's deliberate and intentional. Yeah. And so like, why has it been quiet in council when you know that we have more signatures and slice a few of them, if you want to slice a few dozen, thousand, whatever you want to slice, we have enough signatures in those boxes to transform our city. We have enough signatures in those boxes. This year, we're talking about Trump lost and called, oh boy, like, Raffensperger, can I get 10,000, right? Like, if you look at the signatures that are in the in those boxes, right? We're talking about the margin for the 2020 election. We're talking about more voters who have voted for surely a council member, but a mayor in the city, right? You're talking about the same voices of people who, when you go to their communities and ask them to vote, sometimes they do not feel like it because they're like, this is a transaction. You want me to do something for you in this specific moment. And so if nothing else, in honoring the voices of people, again, those people could be all over the spectrum. They could care about a number of issues. They may not be anti-cops, right? But they may be an environmentalist. They may be teachers. We saw people taking off from work to come to public comment so that they can participate in this democracy, right? Having people watch their children, figuring out what food looks like, being closed out of this process. And so I think to your point earlier, Rohit, it's like you're gonna have a problem with people having faith in our democracy. And we're also gonna have a problem with the people who wanna come in. I understand national hasn't weighed in, some of our federal candidates and so forth haven't weighed in, but you're going to have a problem with asking people to vote. I told you what I wanted on a municipal level in a year when I wasn't supposed to care. And now you're asking me, because you need something from me, to vote, 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 and we have our Democrats and our elected officials who run around here talking about good trouble and talking about how we need our democracy and we need pro-democracy stance on X, Y, and Z. This doesn't line up. And people are not stupid. And so when people say, you're playing in our face and all this, like, that is what you feel. And we don't have to have I want to be clear, we don't have to have the conversation about reimagining public safety. We have to have the conversation about this facility because this specifically is the thing that people said they wanted to weigh in on. So what I would like to see, honestly, so that we're not doing all the work as community organizations and political organizations, is a true open process where we could still have town halls, we could still have discussions. If you are hearing from the folks in your echo chamber or whoever it is, right, like, we don't want to see this happen, I can guarantee you that there are people who are saying we do want to see it happen or vice versa, right? And so, like, what does it actually look like to have a posture of co-governance where when we put people in office, they come back to us so that we can co-create what our democracy looks like, what our policies look like, because we're affected on all these different issues that intersect with, like, Cop City. And until you really have those conversations, you do not know why someone is saying we don't support this facility or we do support this facility.
Does that change your perspective at all? Or, like, is that kind of, what I want to figure out is, like, look, when we even wanted you to be here today, it was so that hopefully there's an opportunity for us to all share perspective and maybe even change some minds and have some action. But help me understand, is this just something you're not going to change your mind on, or are you gaining perspective here that would be helpful? Is there something else you want to know from this panel of experts that may help you make a better decision or help you figure out what your next step is going to be? Like, what do you need?
So I'll answer this, and I do have to run.
Yeah,
actually.
I understand.
And
So
there's a lot of expertise up here that I've been sucking up a lot of oxygen. I'm sensitive to that, so I hope that you spend a lot of time.
We're going to continue the conversation with them, yes.
To your question, look, I mean, we're a little bit, not quite talking past each other. I haven't talked to all of my colleagues on city council about how they feel about a referendum, right? I suspect, now this is not etched in stone, I will find out, I think at some point, that most council members and most of my residents are fine with a referendum. I think that the part that I'm frustrating you all with is wanting there to be a very clear and legally sound process by which the signatures that were collected, of which there are many, there was a massive effort, right? It's a Herculean task to get that done in a state in which we rarely see these types of efforts. But I want to make sure that that process is clear and certain so that when it happens again, we don't have a protracted, because what's going to happen is the 11th Circuit's going to rule, and whoever it favors, the other side is going to appeal. It's going to get appealed again. There's going to be continual litigation, right?
Why would you not let a process start if you didn't have a process?
I'm sorry?
I'm curious why.
We had to approve a process.
That's what I'm saying, but you didn't have if you're saying that, you just said what I'm frustrated with y'all about is the fact that you guys are expecting a legal process that is clean, that is this, that is that. And I'm saying, shouldn't we from our legislative branch? Like, there's I'm asking like, but if it wasn't a process, then wasn't the thing to do to say, don't collect any signatures, we don't want you to waste your time, let us come up with a process first and we'll play by that.
Well, there was a process set out, and it was folks who did not like the city's process that first filed suit, right? On the signatures. It's a fair thing to push back on.
That wasn't a process, that was a very specific guideline for how you collect signatures.
Right.
But a process would have included when you submit it, how many signatures, is there a
Right.
curing process
It's fair.
after you
It's fair.
submit? So
Yeah.
it was not a
That's fair. But you know, once we're into this legal dispute over elements that we trying to stay out of the weeds on, but that have to be adjudicated, you know, it is, in my opinion, premature to start a referendum, like a referendum vote until we go through that process. Look, I've said emails, probably some of you have sent me emails, assuming we go through this process and everything's counted and the record number of signatures there, I will vote to put it on the ballot. I think that city council's role is largely procedural at that point, right? Because that's what is required of the council once those votes are, or those signatures are collected and counted. But until we have clarity in a direction for the 11th Circuit, I think that we're going to be in this holding pattern. I think all of us are surprised, you and even folks at the city, that the 11th Circuit hasn't ruled yet. I mean, it's been a long time, and we're working on 8-9 months in ways that I think we all expected to rule earlier in the year.
Would you favor the dropping of an appeal? And just getting...
Well, again, I'm not getting into the merits of the case. Like, I don't, depending on what, the ruling could come down a number of ways, or there could be elements that they say yes to or no to, and I think the grounds for appeal, depending on what the ruling...
But the ultimate, like, debate and conversation around the appeal itself is around, ultimately what that's going to tell you or indicate for you is timeline and number of signatures. But if you take timeline out of it, right, you say, look, we trust that you followed a general timeline that was set out. You may have debate on whether the number of signatures are there or not, but they're out there for everybody to see, and you can verify them and validate them in the process now that you've laid out. If the appeal was dropped, that would start immediately. The only thing an appeal will tell you is ultimately whether you guys have to follow or want to follow a particular timeline or number. But you don't need to have that in order to...
Again, I said this at the start, I'm very aware of weighing into the merits of what is before the 11th Circuit. I don't have full knowledge of it, I'm not particularly fluent in it. I know what you're trying to get me to do, right? I get it. But I'm not going to say yes or no because I don't know what's before us. And I know that sounds like, no pun intended, a cop-out. But that's just, I'm a recovering lawyer. Like, I know you can trip over yourself really quickly if you're making declarative direction on something that's not yet clear as to what you're talking about. And so I'm just going to pull back on not commenting on that. Yeah.
The issue that court is going to decide does not have to do with whether that referendum can happen. It has to do with who could get the signatures, if it's a City of Atlanta thing, and who can collect. That's what the issue is about, correct? That's what the issue is about. That's going to determine what timeline should be used. No, it has to be a short one. It can't be done. And that's nothing to do with putting it on a referendum but only City of Atlanta residents. Nobody's asking anything else to happen.
Yeah. And again, I would defer to the article in the support report late September last year that set out the law department's opinion as to why council initiating a referendum, in their opinion, is unconstitutional. Yeah.
Here, I got
Except when the state of Georgia has
One second.
And my wife's going to divorce me, and I'll get home and help with the kids. Yeah.
What is the mayor's objection to holding a referendum?
Yeah,
I know you talked with him.
I've not talked with him about this. I would.
Strong mayor, I mean,
Yeah.
so when you say you're for it, which gives me heart, and there is no prejudice since it's not in your community, but so you're saying the council, you have not had a conversation with the mayor about why he's opposed to this?
Yeah, I think you have to ask the mayor. I mean, you could comport that the law department's position reflects the mayor's position.
Well, we know it's a strong mayor, and the law department works for the mayor. So the decision you've made to support Cop City has nothing to do with the mayor's influence over this process. You would support it even if...
We've had this decision under two mayors. I mean, it came up under Mayor Bottoms in one aspect, right, the right to enter into a contract, and then we had a funding vote under Mayor Dickens. So my policy decision or my vote was unrelated to who was mayor.
So your position is truly that it's a facility that size in the community, particularly a black community, since it's obviously not yours, is okay. That is what's driving your vote.
So look,
No, you gotta go, so just.
yeah, no, I'm happy to answer your question. Like, again, I think that you're asking me to say, this is all good or all bad, right? And I will say to you, and I've said this in committees that I've been on and in debate, like, there is just, I would say for the folks who voted yes on the various votes, there are probably a couple who don't lose any sleep at night, right? They believe in every aspect of it. I think for a lot of us who voted yes, there's still heartburn about various aspects of it, right? Whether it's the location, whether it's the environmental impact. Now, that doesn't mean that, but when weighing all the variables, like, I still felt that this was the right thing to do to me. And, you know, I know that many of you disagree with me on this, and that's fine. I felt the vitriol, I hear the vitriol, I get it. The facility was important. Do you need that big a facility? Maybe not. What matters to me is what happens in the facility. I know what you're telling me is what also matters is where the facility is. And I understand that, right? And I think you've made some very valid points about there are certain parts of town this would never show up in, and that's 100% right, right? Yeah.
And one of them is yours.
Well, there's also not the land for that. But I will say, I had a conversation with the mayor before, you know, some point last summer. And I said, you know, I think pick a different location, the conversation would change a bit. Are there other places we've looked at doing this that are more, for example, in an industrial area by the airport or whatever it may be? And we can still disagree on whether we need the facility or not. I think we need it. And the response then was largely, we've looked at a few places, we have to go buy the property, we don't own the property, and it would cost a lot more money and extend the time period for which it would, right? Which is probably a valid reflection. Now, whether that's, but that policy decision was never put before us, that was the one choice put before us, right? So, look, I think your advocacy and the things you're calling to light are important and fair game, right? Because there are elements of racial justice, environmental justice at play here.
And just point out racism. Yes.
Yeah, this is implicit in what I said, yeah. And you know, we need to be having this conversation. Yes.
So Mira, I know you need to go.
Yeah.
You didn't have to be here, and you showed up, right? So we will make sure that those questions are shared with everybody. If folks have additional questions that come out of here, but there's additional conversation, we'll send that your way.
Yeah, I'll leave my cards at the table. I have my cell phone number. I'm always happy to talk. You know, I know this is a difficult and emotional, and now, you know, a multi-year challenge that a lot of us have been navigating. And so I'm always happy to have the conversations.
Okay, we appreciate you being here. I wanted to turn it over to you, Dr. Eccles, like kind of what you just brought up, which is that this would not happen in any other neighborhood. Can you tell us, what are communities supposed to do at this point, right? At this point now, how are we supposed to have I mean, you were part of the conversation that was just here. What's your takeaway? Do you feel like we can now go to those neighborhoods and communities and say, I think there's a pathway, or should they just not believe in this?
Well, I think that more of a comfort level in the Black community about this, you know, this whole notion of anti-police. And as I said when I started this conversation, that kind of drove was the source of the initial wedge, where we are not anti-police. I don't know, and I guess, you know, if the referendum happens and you know, folks can vote their own, if it makes it that point, then that's fine. But the bigger issue is how Entree used it more than anything else, because that is what's reported in the media, you know, that this is, this whole effort, you know, is driven by this certain segment of Atlanta that's not representative, particularly even of the folks who normally vote. I mean, we're talking about, you know, people who are, you know, generally in their 50s, 60s, 70s, who will vote religiously. And he has been able to control the narrative and keep it focused on this segment of the population, which always is, many of whom do not live here, that want to defeat this.
You're an expert on the impacts on the land. They're saying that the construction has already started, right? Okay. So, and the mayor has said that this thing will be completed between October and December. What are for those of us who are not as well versed on the environmental concerns on this, or the conservation concerns, I think this is like, people just kind of throw that out sometimes, and they're like, and the environment. And there are some people who understand that very deeply, and then there are other people who don't fully have the language or the understanding of what we mean when we say the impacts on the environment. Can you help give us some insight into what the environmental impacts are of a facility of this size on a green space in this type of location?
I think initially that was a big issue. I mean, City of Atlanta tried to hide for the longest just how big it was. Forever, all you saw in the paper was that it was 85 acres. The land disturbance permit never confirmed, never supported that. It was always 171 acres. And so you have 125 acres left of that 300 acre site. So, from an environmental standpoint, destroying that many trees, we were talking about an environmental justice community that already has all kind of adverse health impacts related to heat island effects, asthma, ozone pollution from all the truck traffic that's already out there, and it gets trapped.
Yeah.
And so there are very serious environmental justice issues. If you go online to EPA, they talk with EJ screen. You can see that very clearly. And I am not convinced. I know what they say in the media. They've been saying, it would be a done deal. But I think enough. I don't know. Sometimes I feel if there is enough community opposition to it, and I think that's what's always been missing in this fight, is the community opposition. And but there's one more other part to it that I think is important, and that's the economic part. There is no way in the world that the City of Atlanta, and this comes to community opposition and even the folks who live over there is no way in the world that Atlanta can support that facility, based on just 2,000 EMS, fire, and Atlanta police being trained. I know the initial focus was on bringing folks from across the country. Well, there's 60 or 70 more of these going up, so that whole economic base is pretty much gone
bringing
away.
in folks from all it's like we work for.
That's gone away.
Yeah.
So it'll end up where I think that you're spending so much public money to support this facility that it will lose favor. I honestly do believe that, because the attraction's not there. Okay, how many folks can you bring in from across the world?
Yeah.
That's just not going to happen.
Right.
So I think there's an opportunity just in terms of the cost being so great at some point that they scale back that facility, and with enough focus on the community, and I think really doing some organizing and reaching out and approaching it from the standpoint of environmental justice that is just rampant in that area, and it just Cop City is just a later day manifestation. It's a lot going on.
Yeah.
So I do hope that that some of what I said, some of those issues will come to fore, because nobody wants to support the destruction of their community.
Yeah.
That's absurd. That whole notion is absurd.
Yeah.
And it's insulting, as a matter of fact. So is how we can, and I continue to engage with the community. Our focus is on the river and getting people on the river, and because I think that's really the heart of the community.
Yeah.
We have a grant we just received from ARC to engage the community around the river. And, you know,
so this work keeps going with or without, yeah.
Yeah. And
for you, Brittany, there are so many organizers, so many people who led on petitions, so many people who, as you said, like took time off work that were a part of this process. And when you talk to a lot of folks right now, there's a range of emotions, and a lot of it feels deflating. It's like, okay, well, it didn't work. I think the AJC also incorrectly reported something recently just saying, oh yeah, they didn't have the signatures. Like there's already, without the signatures haven't even been counted yet. So there's almost a defeatist narrative that has been out there, that this is over, let's move on to the next thing. And also funding starts to dry up. People are like, I gotta eat. I'm not sure I can keep organizing around this issue. And honestly, there's just a lot of pain and hurt that this felt like, okay, maybe I'm gonna break up with the city of Atlanta a little bit. What's keeping you going? And what are you telling organizers here that were a part of these efforts on not how they should feel, but why should they stay in this? Why should they keep going after this happened?
Yeah.
Easy question.
Right. You know, I think like we've always had to hold our people to account. I say I'm using that very loosely. We've always had to hold elected officials and people who are in public service to account, also our government to account. And so like, it's not the first and it won't be the last. And I think, you know, for us, it's not just one issue. So at Working Families, we're clear that we have to fight for a democracy that works for all of us, not wealthy folks, not the elite, surely not the Atlanta Police Foundation, not corporations, except it's a long list. But when we start talking about people who have been historically excluded and folks who have protected identities in this country, right, then we really talk about folks who have been left behind or who our systems try to leave behind.
Yeah.
So I think a few things, it's like whatever your lane is, you have to think about, okay, how do we build power with our people to weigh in on our democracy, whether that's electoral or whether it's some issue where, like, whatever it is, I think that folks need to have a political home. So that's one, because we can't stop organizing. Two is like, if this is the first one, won't be the last issue. We got it. Three, our elected officials don't have a backbone. And so like, it is a real question about who we are going to elect to represent us, so that when we're sitting across the table from them and we're saying, hey, this is actually exploiting workers. Hey, this is actually going to cause harm in this community. Hey, we need more transparency. We will not hear, well, we have been silent in council. What you will hear is, we have also been brainstorming and thinking through how we can use our government to serve our people and address your issues. And so that's another thing. It's like, we do have the ability to change the choices on the ballot. And a lot of times, because these are nonpartisan races, and there's a lot of sacrifice that it takes to run for public office and serve, people are like, okay, we don't want to go that route because we want to be on the outside. And then lastly, we just have to continue to build people power, because although we did not win, we don't have the clear win of having this on the ballot, right? We did have and do have national attention and eyes on us right now in Atlanta. We did and do have 100,000 people who said, I am taking action. And so we shouldn't minimize that. So that's another thing. It's like, we can talk about like the popular and hot button and like most salient issues based on some polls. We didn't do any polls. We did a temperature check. And you're right, we don't know where they are. We believe that a lot of them are with us. But if we stop now, then we will not agitate the folks who are in elected office, but also the people in the law. You should think twice about who you're hiring in this law office that's using the law for other political motivations, right? And so like these things start to all come together. You're doing work around the, not work with, but you interview the IG, right? Like what's the role of our government? Like if we don't keep going, then just imagine if no pressure is on, this is what they're doing now in our face as we are collecting signatures and doing the thing. And so if we sit down and we're chilling, I hope you and your family are doing too.
Ruby Beth, I'm going to ask you a question, then we'll open it up to the public, and we have a lot of people watching online as well, and then we'll wrap in just this short bit. I know y'all, I don't have the answer for that, Steve, but happy to get you that afterward. But like, I wanted to ask you, Ruby Beth, you said something about the fact that, we're putting all the ingredients in place to be on our way to pretty detrimental and dire circumstances for our democracy. You heard kind of what an elected official had to say about where he stands on this particular issue. Are we in a state of emergency in Atlanta? What's your read here? And if so, like, what do we need to do? What do we need to do next? Even if you could provide some legal guidance, because the law is being used to say this is why it can't move forward. Is there a role for the law to be used to say this is why it will move forward? Or is the law not prepared necessarily to do that?
Well, the city's legal team, that's who we have here. I do think it's extremely important to be really precise about where we are in terms of an emergency, right? Like, I think it's really important to define authoritarianism in conversation with like fascism, in conversation with democracy. Like, I do think it's useful. And so I don't think it's particularly useful to say like Atlanta is just like XYZ. Like, I don't actually think it's particularly useful to say like this is the worst of the worst, where like we know that across the world is not true. So I think that's like an important like context in order to give this color. But yes, like this is an emergency. This is unacceptable behavior for a government, right? Like that's why we're here. And so I think what Brittany was saying is 100% how I feel too, which is that this is about power. And it's about us needing more power. Right? And the way that we build power is organizing, exactly like Dr. Eccles and Brittany have been saying. So I think that using it in that kind of context can give us a path forward of thinking about what does it actually mean to build power in these moments when we feel so defeated by the shenanigans that have been being pulled on us for so many years. And I think in terms of the legal piece, in terms of getting as good at using the law as they are is part of that, certainly. But I think it's much more about organizing the lawyers, right? It's the same mechanisms. It's still building power. It's building resident power for the people in Southeast Atlanta. It's building people power for the folks who were, for folks who were collecting signatures, like there was no agitation to get people to sign this. There was, it was like, it was work, but it was not, people were like, yep, great, where do I hand it over? Oh, I don't qualify, like, why not? I live right next to it, all those kinds of things, right? So I think the pieces around the legal, the pieces around having the amount of money that they are spending on this appeal, right? That alone can tell you how powerful the law is. Yeah. So absolutely, there's a legal element of this, but I think it's more about using the lawyers to flank the movement, right? It's more about the people who are actually doing the door knocking and doing the base building work and talking to people about if it's not cops, if it's not environment, what is it for you? Yeah. What is the thing, what are the things that make you stressed about what it means to live here right now? What are the things that make you joyful about what it means to live here right now, and going from there? I think all of those pieces are what helps us build power, and I think we need more power. Gotcha. Thank you. All right, we're going to open it up for questions. If you could direct your question to a panelist. If you don't, then I'll direct it to a panelist. And if you could say your name, and questions end with question marks. So just want to make sure that we want to be able to get as many of these as we possibly can. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Kat. What is, I think as far as like, there's been so much organization, I think I've been like, I helped with like trying to petition sign and everything, I live in unincorporated town. I'm really impressed, I think, by the number of people who got interested, because I had people, I had off-duty, I had a retired cop sign it, saying, I just think we should have a vote. And I'm wondering if people were just upset, I think, by the lack of transparency. And I'm wondering if there's like a movement as far as whether this gets defeated or it wins, if like we kind of take that, you know, mobilizing to like really make sure this referendum process is locked in, like all those things are locked in, like how we can kind of help the community directly, like on the river, because like I'm impacted by it, but not nearly as bad as people even closer to it. So it's like, what is, I think, the next steps, like as far as like a group of people who are really energized behind this?
Brittany, you want to take that?
This feels juicy.
Thank you if you were on it.
Yeah, no, thank you. I see all these Cop City shirts in here. So I think, one, it makes sense for me to say that I'm here at Working Families Power, but we were one of, you know, several organizations, and so our Cop City coalition is starting to meet again, to really talk through like mass engagement, community engagement. We are an electoral organization, and so a lot of times what you'll see us doing is like somewhere on the ballot, we're talking to the electorate, having conversations, whether that's around persuasion or education, et cetera. What I'll offer is, I'm like, am I okay to give my contact information? We can, the role of our organization and what we have created in Cop City is really, right? And so we couldn't do this if people didn't have the energy and juice to go out and collect signatures, right? Like, yeah, okay, we built the thing, right? We built the structures and it was fucking wild, right? But we had more than 3,500 shifts that were completed. 1,575, and yes, I know this number, unique people came out, like different people came out to volunteer in one way or another, and that doesn't even capture people who couldn't collect signatures, so helped us in other ways, just so they can be involved, and just so they could flank us for some support, right, down to people. So anyway, I say that to say, like, this is the vehicle where we decide what we want to do now, so it's not just what we do in the future, like what we want to do now, so what that mass engagement looks like, what that very hyper-local engagement looks like, what the political engagement looks like, what the electoral engagement looks like. So I would just say, I was sitting here stalling, I'm like, what's the best way? If you text Georgia to 30403, we're going to be sending out updates. And I can't remember the Cop City Vote Coalition email, that's why I keep stalling. But if you text that to 30403, we will get you plugged in. But at the very least, like, I think what we can commit to doing is having a conversation with the folks who we have all of your information, because that's how we meticulously track it. So we can commit to putting something on the calendar. But we really want to know, like, what's your skin in the game? How do you want to move forward? And how can we be used as a vehicle and as a vehicle for that collective, work, whatever that looks like.
What's that? Yeah, got it. I have to repeat the questions. Okay, got it. Amy, if you could stand and say your question, and then I'm going to have to repeat it for the folks online.
So my question is, if we get to have a vote and it's voted down, what happens to this half bill?
Okay, so maybe Ruby Beth, if you could, okay, Kyle, so the question is, if the city council actually does put this on the ballot and a referendum is put onto the ballot and it overwhelmingly is not in favor of repealing the council's decision, then what happens?
Isn't.
Oh, excuse me, I'm so sorry about that. Is in favor, like what happens? Sorry, I was repeating the yes or the no, which is the one on the ballot. So if people voted yes, that they do want to repeal the decision of city council, what happens next? I want your non-legal opinion, yes.
Goes back to the ordinance that was referenced before back in 2021, which authorized the mayor to enter this lease agreement. So if the authorization is taken away, then there's no lease that's left, right? That no longer is valid. Additionally, that ordinance that was passed said that this lease can be broken at any time for any reason, just with notice. So if you read beyond what the petition says itself, but what the will of the voters would be, it would behoove the mayor, any future mayor, to stop that lease agreement. Because that, in my non-legal opinion, would be the intent of the voters who said yes to repeal that ordinance.
And a reference that was also made, thank you, Kyle. Kyle's our policy director. We also, there is precedent of the council calling on the mayor to break an agreement. For example, with ICE, there was a relationship that the city had with ICE. We were able to break that by having council call. If the facility is complete, that's a great question. We'll pose that to council members and see if they can respond back. Because I presume there's no one on this panel that can answer that question.
I cannot.
Okay. Thank you for the question. Yes, in the back.
Good evening. My name is Anoa Chanda, and I live in South Florida, but from the site and did not find out about this until someone came knocking on my door, summer 2021. So going back to I think July maybe before the September ordinance. Just thinking about whose responsibility is it to make sure that community members, I know I'm not the former city council person who had that seat before, but whose responsibility is it to make sure that community members even know this is happening? Because as plugged in as I am, I know two of the four of you sit on this panel had no clue. And so I know my neighbors, even the folks who say, yes, they want this because they think that these is going to put foot traffic in the community, and that's not what this is doing. So where does the responsibility lie for the public to actually be informed when we're being asked our opinion about these decisions?
You captured that? Okay, great. I'll turn it to you, Dr. Eccles.
And that's the issue. Usually the disseminating of information comes from the council person primarily, because most community members do track through their council person what's going on. As you know, in Southeast Atlanta wasn't there, and also a lot of organizations that normally would be engaged in the public, not telling you who to vote for, but just the issues. They've been silent on this issue. Yeah. A lot of them. And so we didn't have even the organizations that were committed to getting the word out involved in this. So I think that's a really big part of why so many people say that as much information has been disseminated across the world about this. There are folks in Southeast Atlanta pretty darn close to this facility who had not a clue as to what is going on. And you have to remember also, this is kind of unprecedented. The state of Georgia is pushing this a lot. This relationship between Brian Kemp and Andre is real. Yeah. Yeah. The reason it's being promoted by Andre for Brian Kemp is real. So this is unlike any issue. I've been in this city a really long time. There's never been any kind of issue like this. And I don't anticipate that it will be another one for a long time. But that's what's driving a lot of this. I mean, I'm sure everybody in this room has heard the story of how this came to be. And that is that Brian Kemp made a deal with Andre. If he stayed off Buckhead City, Andre would make the folks in Buckhead feel safe and build the police training facility. That's a lot of politics behind this decision. Because usually Brian Kemp doesn't give a crap about what's going on in Atlanta. So you have to consider all of that, you know, when we talk about where we are and where we are going and whether or not people are engaged and that kind of thing. Because I think a lot of people are not engaged because the usual mechanisms for engaging them have been missing in action.
Sorry. Yes, Steve, go ahead.
Well, just to comment on that, my former council person, Joyce Shepard, sponsored it. And she brought it to the neighborhoods to say this, a plan that was laid out and drawn out. We all went, where did this come from? And she says, well, we've been talking about it for years. None of us had heard about it. Yeah. So, you know, I mean, like it says, there's just not this openness.
Yep. Other questions? Yes, go ahead.
Were there other council members that you invited tonight that declined?
No, we did invite all of the council members to attend. They didn't say anything, so I can't say that they declined, because that wouldn't be accurate. We did ask Amir specifically to be on the panel, and the reason was, number one, I wanted clarity on he wasn't one of the people who voted. I wanted the answer to how he would have voted, yes or no on that. In addition to that, he is, we actually have a few slides here on, of all the people, oh, here we go. We actually have quotes. I mean, shout out to our team who went and rewatched every single one of these meetings. Like, I'm talking about, they watched every single piece of this, and they pulled out quotes at any time that they actually mentioned that they were for or against the referendum. And we actually have Mary Norwood saying that we're going to verify these signatures. Marcy Collier Overstreet saying we're all in agreement now that we want the petitions to be counted and seen. Antonio Lewis said we just heard Buckhead, Southside, Southwest, South say that signatures need to be counted. We also had Byron Amos who say it was disheartening, need to do it to move the city forward, and Liliana Bakhtiari, who also has said that that people need to hold their leaders accountable. So there is, we have reminded these folks that this is what they said. We didn't think it was going to be useful to bring people who have repeatedly said that they support this to keep, who are also against the facility, to also then have to like retell you that. But we felt it was important for someone who said, I support the facility, or I support the facility and I support referendum, to tell us why it's not moving forward. And Amir fit that bill for us.
Could you move that back one to the
Yes, ma'am.
two screens here?
Right there?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it was the three screen, or the three screen?
Well, with Mary Norwood.
There were two.
The Mary Norwood and Antonio Lewis.
Okay, gotcha. This one? Okay. Other questions in the audience? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to, maybe ask Jackie, but in the context of global urbanization and continual gentrification, which means people with fewer resources moving into the more rural areas, and the crux of this being that this high-impact development being outsourced to unincorporated DeKalb, where the people surrounding can't even vote for the politicians making the decision about what's happening in their backyard, and just like the bigger picture of that outsourcing and our responsibility as urbanites or people in the city for that outsourcing of pollution and injustice in general. I'm just asking, like, is that even a thing that's kind of being considered in terms of Cop City being an example of that, I guess.
I think the fact that it is an unincorporated DeKalb as a major, complication. I think it probably optimistic as well. There are just not that many. Well, no other hospital facilities this size.
So, yeah, that is, in terms of the backlash particularly to the mayor, or the mayor, I think, any particular council member for that matter, it was minimized by the fact that it is in unincorporated DeKalb. I do think that was one of the driving factors of forging ahead with it, because there was very little voter showing up impact on the folks in Atlanta that are pushing this, no exposure. So yeah, I do think that is exactly what happened. Now, when you look at DeKalb County, I mean, it's got its own serious problems with environmental justice and racism issues, big time related to their drinking water and sewer system. So they have their own set of problems, and it's, so I think the bigger conversation, honestly, when it comes to politics, is that DeKalb County and the city of Atlanta has a responsibility for ensuring that vulnerable populations, and that's who's impacted in Southeast Atlanta. I mean, even through South DeKalb are heard and addressing those issues, and they just failed miserably. And I think that's an issue totally outside of Cop City. They have failed miserably. And I think if people want to get up in arms and take that on, that's a whole nother issue. Because I think in DeKalb County, that's an effort, a need to organize folks around who's impacted by the water and the sewer system, for which there is absolutely no money to pay for in the Black community. There's money and efforts to address those issues in white North DeKalb County, but none in Black South DeKalb County. So it's just along that corridor, and I think it has to do with this opportunity to hold the political leadership, both in terms of the CEOs and mayor and the councils, accountable, because there's a lot to account for, over and above Cop City.
We had a question that came in. Someone actually printed it and just dropped it off before the panel. They weren't able to make it here. It was very nice. Thank you, Ms. Brooks, for this. The question says that, I'll have to truncate it a little bit, it is understandable that frustration has reached an extreme level, and this frustration generates energy that fuels desperate measures among interested parties and groups. Violence and property destruction further divides the community, adds to heartache and distrust, while distracting from the deeper need for commitment to collaboration. What does it take for you as leaders to embrace extreme actions in troubling times?
To embrace extreme actions?
I'm just reading the piece of paper. What does it take for you as leaders to embrace extreme actions in these troubling times? So maybe what I'm going to try to rephrase, just so we can make this into a question that we might be able to answer in this lifetime, is this is a sentiment that a lot of people did write online, sent us stuff, whatever it might be, around that violence itself can be polarizing. So why what does it, are we embracing that, or are we not embracing that? I think that's the question that this is asking. I think I know the answer, by the way, so don't shoot the messenger here, but want to get a sense, Brittany, maybe if you could take this on of, there's a lot of different folks who are inside of the organizing community. People have different views on where direct action is most appropriate, and maybe where democracy or organizing is most appropriate. How do you hold all of that?
Yeah, I mean, the quick answer is we don't. It's not for us to contain. So I think one thing that we have to understand is there were no that were used. The referendum and signature gathering process itself is one tactic, if we're thinking about it. And we got to that tactic because folks put their bodies on the line. We had a death, someone was killed. Right? We got to that place because folks did everything from public comment to the extreme, right? So like literally saying we are going to defend, right? So like we wouldn't even be here if that hadn't happened, just in terms of the referendum. That's right. Yeah. So we should like just really make sure that we respect folks who are not in this space, who maybe weren't inside of the signature gathering process, and using this as a tool to try to try to, you know, express our voices. The other thing that I'll say is, I'm thinking of a quote. MLK said, "Riot is the language of the unheard," right? And so, like, I think when we're so quick to say, like, this is the acceptable tactic, right? So you can do this thing, and we're going to connect that to some respectability, and we're going to make sure that when you talk to people, that you use this jargon and this language, then we do a disservice. And so what I'll say is, like, this wasn't, the intention here was not to contain anything, right? Folks feel how they feel, they move how they move. But what I will say, our role in the Cop City Vote Coalition and collecting the signatures and inside the referendum process, when we speak here and even publicly, or, you know, when we're talking to folks who are actively building out direct action, you know, strategy and carrying that out. And if we don't meet Andre somewhere and do the work of calling him out, trying to get him on record, then, you know, we miss that opportunity. If we don't do the thing of collecting signatures and telling them, hey, all right, now we're playing by the rules. You got some rules, right? No, you ain't got no rules. Okay, let's move through that too, right? But like, if we're not doing that, then we also won't advance. If we're not doing the work of deep organizing, because let's be clear too, the organizations that were involved in this did not just pop up for Cop City or for this referendum. And so that is why I said, if you don't have a political home or organizational home, find one, because that is where we are able to activate. We don't ramp up to being able to collect. Some organizations collected 20, 30, 40,000 signatures. You don't ramp up overnight and have the infrastructure that you need to do these types of things if you don't have organization in place. And then we had a lot of individuals. So I say that to say, like, there is no, I go back to the first point, it's not designed to contain, right? But what we do have to make sure that where we are as a community is like, we gotta be lock in step. So I can't tell Ruby Beth, like, hey, that legal stuff is not gonna work. It's like, Ruby Beth, what tools do you have in the toolbox, and like, how can we use it? Because the legal department, you know, is politically motivated. So that is like what we need, because you're building the ecosystem, right? And if you don't have a diversity of tactics and expertise and thought leadership across the ecosystem, then we fail. Yeah. Because we see that they're gonna use every tool that they have at their disposal and the weight of the government itself to then repress us.
Yep. Thank you, Brittany. We have time for maybe one or two more questions. Anything else? Yes, go ahead.
So, hey, my name's Shab. I just wanted to bring up, so there were flyers somewhere, I don't know where they are, I'll find them in a second. But there's a group called the People's Campaign to Stop Cop City that's continued to meet throughout this. It's really been an outlet, I think, for a lot of the folks who have wanted to keep this fight going. I would say there's several people in this room. Raise your hand if you're with the People's Campaign. And so we decided to mark the occasion of the 1 year. We're gonna be going to City Hall. I think that a lot of people just feel like not letting them get away with it. This was great to be able to confront them. And so if anyone's interested in helping in that effort, talk to one of the folks that just raised their hand. There's a flyer. It's got a QR code. Sorry, September 16th at City Council. Yeah, join us. I don't know. We got to keep the pressure up, so.
Thanks, Shabs. What's that?
Can I answer?
Oh, yeah, I thought you were, yes, of course, yeah, go ahead, please.
I don't know if somebody else wanted to ask one.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say one more thing about the conversation around violence, which is one of the, just to kind of go back to this idea of power, one of the types of power that I think we need to contend for is power over definitions. And so if we want to talk about violence, I think we should. And I also think it should include things like unclean drinking water and the inability to get around affordably, and the fact that childcare is $1,900 a month. Like, if we want to think about like what are the things that feel violent in my life and in my community and to the people that I care about, there's a way to kind of take a little bit of power and control back on just the conversation and the framing.
Yeah.
So the idea of property destruction being the only thing we're allowed to talk about when it happens takes so much power out of the fact that people are putting their lives on the line for something that they feel so strongly about for all kinds of reasons, right? There's the police piece of it, which is so important to so many of us, and there's the water piece of it that is so important to so many of us, and those pieces are about our relationships with those things as violent effects on our lives.
Yeah.
So I just think it can be useful to kind of reframe the definitions when we enter into those conversations, because I think they're worth having, and I don't really think people should be shamed for saying like, this makes me uncomfortable, like property destruction makes me uncomfortable. Like, that's a conversation worth having in the context of what are all the other things that make you uncomfortable about feeling oppressed or unsafe.
That's really helpful context. Any other questions? I want to make sure everybody is heard in this room. Good? Okay, so last thing for y'all is this work is heavy. It is, I'm trying to figure out whether, I was trying to write out, there was a guy on the phone the whole time. I was like, will his phone conversation last longer or this conversation? So I think we might have beat him. So welcome to Edgewood. Love it. Oh, he's still on there? Oh, I hope he's all right. I love this street. This is one of my favorite streets in the city. I'm so happy we're here. These are our people. This work is super heavy. Y'all did not need to, you did not have to show up today. You know, for a lot of folks, it was like, you know, why even bother having the conversation? That folks are not serious about having it. You know, at CCI for us, we think we have to keep prompting these types of conversations. We have to keep putting people like feet to the fire, say what you said, here's what you mean, here's where it is. I'm super grateful for that this is how you choose to show up. How can the community show up for y'all? Just in the spirit of like, I know that y'all are all responsible for so many other people. You have talked about the communities around the river that you give to, that you care about. I mean, Ruby Beth, the amount of like guidance, support that you provide, not just here, but around the country is powerful, and it matters. And Brittany, without breaking personal privilege, like I would say like you are definitely one of the most like committed, dedicated, and resilient people I have ever met in this work, that it makes people say, okay, you can't be tired. Like, you gotta keep going. Like, if she's still going, then you gotta keep going. And that is, it's contagious, but y'all give so much. What can folks do to fuel you? What ways can we support you, your work, your journey, whatever it is, to get you that vacation that you deserve soon, but also to keep you in this work. I don't want to lose any more people to this work. We certainly can't lose y'all. So how can we fuel into y'all? I'll have you start, Dr. Eccles. What can we do to support you? And not your community, not what, you.
Oh, you,
yes.
Oh, man, well, that's it.
I understand.
This is what I do.
Understand, but you, how can we support you?
Because, you know, I work for free. And I think really just tuning in to the whole issue of environmental justice as an issue in the city of Atlanta and environmental racism, because it matters in the city, and particularly holding our politicians and mayor accountable, however you want to get involved in that fight, as particularly a person of color, because, it matters that political leadership in this city is Black. It matters that the mayor is Black. It matters that a majority of the city council in this city is Black. Same in DeKalb County. And it also matters that we're having these kinds of problems, as it relates to the Black community and impacts in 2024. When we didn't have political control, then that was the reason. The Voting Rights Act took care of that from the standpoint that if we can elect people who look like us, who have lived our experiences, who experience the same thing, then things will change. And I think if you want to have impact in terms of the work we do, and even the work that we're talking about here, is that you tune into it and you start to raise those conversations about the debt of gratitude that the political establishment in DeKalb County and the city of Atlanta owe to the folks who voted for them. And so check out our website at southriverga.org, because I think some of those issues just should not be happening. We should not have a situation in South DeKalb County where the EPA in DeKalb County have set up classifications of what's called priority and non-priority areas when it comes to having clean water.
Yeah.
That's something I thought we got away from a long, long time ago. It's in a federal consent decree. It is precedent setting. It does not include the South DeKalb County, 70% of the population in terms of clean water, but it does affect the 30% of the population in North DeKalb County. Those kinds of things should not be happening. Just like in the city of Atlanta, with Cop City, it couldn't be built anywhere else. And the only way we can ensure that it doesn't is to hold folks accountable, and they all do intend to make this an issue with Andre. No doubt about it. My council members are lost cause, but the mayor is not, so promote it.
Dr. Eccles, how long have you been doing this?
Almost 30 years.
When's the last time you just went out dancing?
I do some really cool things.
Yeah?
So that's not it.
All right. I just want to make sure.
I have a very healthy personal life.
All right. I love it. I love it. I just want to make sure. You're taking care of a lot of folks. I just need to make sure if we got to take you a night on the Dr. Eccles, we're so grateful for what you bring up. Please support the South River Watershed Alliance. That doesn't mean with just your thoughts. If all you can do is amplify their work, amplify their work. If you can invest in the work, invest in the work, because that's the only way this work stays alive. Ruby Beth, you are mom extraordinaire while also there was a quote that I think you posted it or something. It was just like, shout out to the women who are chasing their dreams while they are chasing their children. And I just like, I think about people in the movement like y'all in the work for that. But for you, like, how can we pour into you and how can we support you?
I mean, I'll take childcare, y'all.
Yeah.
If you want my 2.5-year-old to come over for an hour, I will bring them over.
There you go. Yeah.
And I also want a shirt that says, I have a very healthy personal life. I learned so much from sitting next to you today. Thank you. And like kind of spiel is like, don't forget the lawyers, like, you know, like the law has a long way to go to make up for all the harm it's caused, and it's not going to. And if we forgo all the strategies, just like Brittany was saying, we're not building enough power. And so I'm constantly kind of like, in a way that I never thought would be my, spiel, asking for that from the organizers who are doing such phenomenal transformative work. So that's just my little kind of, my tagline. And then I think like, there's, growing up here, growing up in Atlanta and watching it become this place that's so unrecognizable to so many of us in all the ways, especially in the last 10 years, is like, I need, as a person, and I think lots of people need more community. I need more community. I need a bigger village. And part of that is becoming a parent, but part of it is feeling lost in the work sometimes. So I do think there is a lot to be said for continuing to do the kind of slog of work of figuring out how to talk to each other better. And how do we communicate and what's our problem solving when we get into, especially within the movement, when we get into it with each other, how do we do that repair work? All of those things are things that will make my life better. Yeah. And I'm committed to being a part of.
Yeah, got to keep checking in on each other, for sure. Brittany, how can we support you in your work? Yeah. Before it was like, I got it. Yeah.
I mean, her on the parent piece, you know, I think creating more space. If you have spaces that you're curating, make them child friendly, help folks to bring their babies and not have to figure out child care. But I mean, I just want to connect with dreamers. I think that one thing that, as much as we talk about what we give, I got a lot out of this. I mean, last summer I was tired and all those things, but I think the connection, so to your point, the community, but also folks who are willing to, what are we dreaming about? What could we do to disrupt these systems that do not serve us, right? And as we're building power, we don't have to look at a model that's adjacent to business class or adjacent to political elite, we don't, because we're the majority. So I really just want to be in space where folks who are you know what, this is a fucking crazy idea, and
let's do it.
We should do this.
Let's do it. You're gonna say that.
So I mean, I feel like I'm hungry for that. And there are so many people who in this, I have met now, where I'm oh, okay. So if you do have that idea, or just lock up, and I mean, we did this a lot, and y'all know this, but lock up in a room and have whatever you need to have so that we can dream, what can it be? Not so much reactionary, it's just what can we have? What do we deserve? What is a public good? All of those things, all those questions, if we throw down together, with conflict and all that, but if we throw down together, we cooking with something,
Yeah, special. Can y'all join me in giving this panel a huge round of applause? I feel like that applause is different right now than it may have been earlier, but I am super grateful that you are here. The thing that I keep saying at the end of each of these is you are the reason why our organization exists, is to create spaces like this where y'all hold us accountable, you hold other folks accountable. There are folks who even through this process, we're you need to do this, you need to push this, you need to do, and when you do it in a way that is constructive and from a place of love, it is so special. I see so many individuals in this room who after this are gonna have to go back to their neighborhoods where they are making sure that the kids who are in that neighborhood are good. They're gonna be able to sleep at night. They're gonna go and have to take people from point A to point B, get up early and teach. We have teachers in this room. We have people who are on the ground. Atlanta is incredible because of you. if I'm just being candid now that this is over, is like, I was honestly really like concerned about this conversation for a second. I was like, damn, maybe we shouldn't have it. I don't know. Like, what are people gonna think? What are people gonna say? They're gonna think we're selling out. They're gonna think like we're platforming like things we don't believe in. Like, what is it gonna be? And every single time I feel that way, I come into rooms and spaces with people like y'all, and you remind me that like we fight for what we believe in, and we can fight each other behind the door, behind closed doors. Like, push me, pull at me, like tell me what you got to say to me. I'm down for that. I love that. But also, like, let's stand it as a united front to like build the world where these three women succeed at the work that they are doing, and that they are uplifted as the real leadership class of Atlanta. So I'm just really, really, really grateful that I'm leaving this room in even better spirits and even more hopeful than I started. So thank you for that. We have, we'll collect those at the back. We are, we got like, I think I messed this up. We have, okay, I'm just gonna say, this Saturday and starting for the next couple weeks, we are interviewing all of the candidates for Post 3 at Large. So Post 3 at Large is up for election this year, by the way. And so there are 5 candidates who are running. We are interviewing all of them one-on-one. That starts this Saturday. It's free and open to the public. We'd love to have you there. We're gonna be also then doing a community forum in October. And I'll end with that because I think we're done. All right, thanks y'all, appreciate it. Thank you. Okay. Yes, everything always has a virtual